Blog Talk Radio. On Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Edie Summers, and my very special guest today is Blake Bauer. We're going to be talking about his book, You Were Not Born to Suffer, Love Yourself Back to Inner Peace, Health, Happiness, and Fulfillment. Blake D. Bauer is an internationally recognized spiritual teacher, energetic healer, and author. His pioneering work centers on loving yourself unconditionally in the present moment as the key to healing yourself, fulfilling your life's purpose, and realizing your greatest potential, both personally and professionally. After studying with spiritual teachers, healers, and masters from all over the world, Blake now practices and teaches various forms of meditation, Qigong, Qigong energy medicine, and Dao Yin, a health and longevity yoga. Blake has also formally studied traditional Chinese medicine, 5-element Chinese medicine, nutritional medicine, herbal healing, psychology, both Eastern and Western schools of thought, past life regression therapy-hypnosis, and various other forms of traditional healing and alternative medicine. Through his private practice, writing, and teaching, Blake has devoted his life to helping others find lasting inner peace, health, happiness, and fulfillment. Bringing together the most effective spiritual practices and holistic approaches to health and well-being, his work and teachings have successfully guided thousands of people internationally toward greater psychological, emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual freedom. And I have the great pleasure of reading Blake's book, You Were Not Born to Suffer, and it's even my greater pleasure to welcome Blake into our studio today. I'm just going to turn on your microphone here. Blake, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Edie. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you. Thanks so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. I'm excited for our chat.
Me too. We have so much to. There's so much to talk about. I just want to first of all say thank you for writing such a profoundly beautiful book full of so much wisdom. It really greatly affected me, and I'm just so grateful that you shared your gift and shared your experience in this beautiful book. It kind of reminds me of. Your writing reminds me a little bit of Eckhart Tolle. I know you guys talk about, I know he talks about being in the present moment too, but I really love your style of writing. It's very profound and yet it's accessible. So I wanted to thank you for that. It's just a beautiful book. So
thank you, Edie. So that's obviously a great honor to hear one that the book, touched you in a deep way and, impacted your life. And then also I respect Eckhart Tolle's work very greatly. And so that's another honor for me to hear. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I really hope that other people get to experience your book as well. And I just want to mention, we're going to mention this again, but we actually are. You graciously offered to give away 2 copies of your book. So your second edition with your gorgeous new cover, which of course has the butterfly on it, which is of course is a huge theme in your book, and I definitely want to get into that. But I just wanted to let anyone know who's listening, who wanted to read your book. This is an opportunity for them to receive a free copy, which is just incredibly gracious of you. So if anyone's listening and wanted to do that, we'll mention this again maybe toward the end of our talk here, but they can go to connectwell.com. That's CONNEKTWELL.com, and just fill out a free profile, and then go ahead and write a couple sentences on why you would like to receive this book on mastering unconditional self-love. So I was just wondering, before we get into the book, can you tell us a little bit? I mean, I definitely want to know about your journey, but also what exactly is unconditional self-love? I know we're going to be talking about this, of course, throughout our talk today, but maybe just in a nutshell, what does that mean exactly?
Well, that's obviously very, very loaded. So I think, and the book, the book's about 300 pages, and hopefully, my intention obviously was to cover what that is in that. And ironically, I just finished recording the audiobook version of the book.
Oh,
and
congratulations.
That took me over. Thank you so much. I'm very excited. Very excited to share that, obviously, because there's a lot of people who have trouble reading because of their eyes or health conditions or because of their lifestyle. They commute a lot, so it's really going to help the message reach a lot more people. But what I was getting at was it took me over 30 hours of recording my voice in a studio, so it could take me that long to really explain what unconditional self-love really means. But over time, I think over time and throughout my journey, it's obviously become more clear to me. And so I can just share, I guess, a few of the key points, I guess, that I practice on a daily basis that just help me to enjoy my life every day and do the work that I was born to do and kind of attend to my relationships and do what I can to keep them conscious and loving and healthy. And I think one thing that came from, my journey and is a big message in the book is that learning to love ourselves unconditionally, and unconditional self-love is founded on the idea that we are the love that we're seeking, because a lot of times, we spend every day looking outside of ourselves for love, never realizing that our soul or our spirit or the life inside of us is an infinite source of pure unconditional love. So I would say that's a really important thing to understand, and understanding what unconditional self-love is that knowing that we have all the love we could ever need inside of ourselves to fulfill the love that we're looking for. Another really important part of unconditional self-love is just accepting whatever we're thinking and accepting whatever we're feeling, both emotionally and the physical sensations in our body in the present moment. So that's a really big part of unconditional self-love, is not fighting or resisting, anything that's going on in our mind, not resisting anything that's going on in our heart, not resisting anything that's going on in our body, and then to take that one step further, not resisting anything that's going on in our environment. So, what's going on in the room that you're in right now, or the space that you're in, or in any moment, not resisting the people and how they're behaving or what they're saying, learning to just kind of accept the outer world as well as the inner world is a really big part of unconditional self-love, because with that type of surrender and acceptance, we don't suffer when we can not try and change things or control things. And that's obviously, so many spiritual masters talk about the idea of surrender and, letting go of control. And so for me, unconditional self-love, that's a very large part of it. And then another really important point for me is just really being true to myself in every moment. So really expressing what I'm feeling in every moment and situation, really expressing, what feels really strongly in my heart, and acting based on that. So speaking based on that, acting based on that, and just really being true to myself. So not compromising myself, not betraying myself, not abandoning my inner truth, just really following my heart, really being honest and authentic, and really just being myself as opposed to trying to be something else or to please other people or to fit in. Those have been, some of the key points to what unconditional self-love really is. And there's obviously so many branches to that tree, but those are some of the most important points that are actually very practical and not just an idea or a theory. So.
Exactly. And thank you so much for explaining some of those. And we're going to actually, I know that we're going to come full circle back to that, a lot of what you just said. I just kind of wanted to give people an overview. And I definitely want to know your backstory too, Blake, but I think what feels really relevant to me right now is I want to draw people directly into the experience of your book, and also to help them get a roadmap for how they get to where you were just talking about, living with an open heart, surrendering. That's the thing, is people want to know how. And so this is what really struck me about your book. Well, there are many, many things, but I have to tell you, when you were your first chapter, you talk about the butterfly, and of course, butterfly means means psyche and soul, but it stands for transformation. And I was wondering if you could share the story of the two butterflies. I literally stopped. I had to stop reading. I was so affected by that story. And also just the metaphor for transformation, how that process occurs, why there is suffering, sort of like the cocoon that you talk about with, sort of you have to kind of go through that cocoon stage and then break out of it. Could you just go through that whole metaphor? It's just absolutely brilliant.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Edie. So first of all, the story that Edie mentioned is a story that is in the first chapter of my book titled The Butterfly, and it's just the chapter that I use to kind of introduce concepts around the journey of our soul towards liberation or towards complete freedom, psychologically, emotionally, physically, financially, and spiritually. And there was a point in my journey where I was struggling in myself emotionally through, some various experiences and situations. And, I came across a butterfly one day throughout this period, and it was, just this gorgeous blue butterfly fluttering on this plant, this beautiful flower. And it just stopped me in my tracks, basically, and broke through everything that was going on inside of my mind and my heart and really opened everything up. And it was like the sun came out for me, and it really snapped me out of what I was going through, kind of this field of suffering I was stuck in myself. And I just began to read everything that I could find on the butterfly, as a symbol from the biological standpoint of the journey that the butterfly goes through and its metamorphosis and what happens on a cellular level, a biological level for the butterfly. And I came across this one story that I just thought was so beautiful and so touching, and so I decided to include it in the book. So it's not a story that I wrote myself, but it's just a story that I heard and that I relayed in my own way. Mm-hmm. And the story was about a lady who brought 2 butterfly cocoons into her home that were about to hatch because she wanted to watch the butterflies break free of their cocoon and take flight. She wanted to observe the process. So she had the butterflies on the cocoons on this table near a window in her home, and eventually one of the butterflies began to begin its journey to get out of its cocoon. And so she observed the process and watched the butterfly kind of, wiggle and kind of, wedge its way through its cocoon. And from her perspective, she felt that the butterfly really struggled and that it was a hard process that from her perspective seemed painful and tiresome. And after, some time, it eventually did make its way out of its cocoon. And she tells the story that the butterfly laid there. Once it had gotten out of its cocoon, it laid there on the table where she had the cocoons, and it didn't get up, and it didn't fly for a little while, but then after a short period of time, eventually it did, and it began to fly, and she had the window open, and eventually it flew out the window. And so after watching that process, she thought to herself, and very much meaning well, just with the natural love in her heart, she wanted to help the second butterfly get out of its cocoon or liberate itself, and she didn't want the second butterfly to struggle in the same way that the first butterfly did. And so, meaning well, she went and grabbed a razor blade, and she proceeded to cut down very gently the center of the butterfly's cocoon and really kind of help open it up. And so she did that, and figuring that eventually the butterfly would get up and fly away, just like the first one did. But after that same period of time that it took the first butterfly to get up and fly away, that second butterfly didn't move, and it never did. And eventually it died as she was watching the process. And she was very confused about why that happened, especially she felt she was, doing the best thing for it. And later on, she had the opportunity to have a conversation with a friend who happened to be a biologist. And she asked her friend, why would that happen? To explain the story and explain what she did, and was wondering why would that happen? I was trying to help the butterfly, but then it died. And the friend, who was a biologist, said that the struggle and the pain that the butterfly goes through to actually liberate itself from the cocoon, so that process of pushing the wings, pushing against the inside of the cocoon, trying to break free and throw the cocoon off of itself, that process in and of itself actually forces a liquid that exists deep inside the body cavity of the butterfly's body, and it forces that liquid out into the very tiny capillaries and those branches that fill the wings of the butterfly. And it's that fluid that actually gives the butterfly's wings the strength to fly. And so without that struggle, the butterfly cannot have the strength to be free and to fly, and then eventually dies. So when I read that story, obviously it resonated very deeply with my own journey and all the struggles and the suffering that I had been through, and most importantly, created for myself. And it just helped for me to put things in perspective as to why I had to go through what I did in order to live my life as a free and full expression of myself, of my true self, free of the shell, the cocoon, the confines that really didn't reflect who I was. So, excuse me. So in the book, I like
story. Go ahead.
Please, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just what a beautiful story.
Thank you, Edie. Yes, it is, and I can't take any credit for it. But I did draw it out in that first chapter of the book, which, and I talk about how, for the caterpillar, that pull into the unknown to create a cocoon for itself, in order to become a free and full expression of itself, is so deep and so natural and so inherent in nature, which we are one with. And so I liken, obviously, that process to our own soul's journey of healing and spiritual awakening. And, in that chapter, I proceed to challenge the reader and explore the idea of, we have two choices. We either settle for the cold comfort of our cocoon and stay trapped in that, or we face our pain and we liberate ourselves from the cocoon so we can live our lives as a free and full expression of who we really are and really do what we came here to do and fulfill our life's purpose. So,
and also, not to interrupt, I also want to, I got so many things just from that chapter alone, but also that the cocoon phase is part of it. It's necessary. Would you even use that word? Like, it's like the struggle. like being in the cocoon is like, I think a lot of us, what I understood you saying is that you can't pass that part up, like it's part of the journey. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, totally. And so, again, if we look at the butterfly, the caterpillar, in order to become a butterfly, cannot pass up the cocoon phase. And so in the same way that as a human being, we can't pass up the cocoon phase if we want to become liberated or enlightened or fully awake. And Edie, I'm not sure if you've read the chapter on the ego yet.
Part of it, yes.
But okay, beautiful. So I proceed in the book to draw a parallel between the cocoon and our ego. And I talk about how as children, we actually create the ego or create our ego as an act of self-love in order to protect our heart from pain. So when we're little caterpillars or little kids, I talk about how we create a separate self or a psycho-energetic. So it's an energetic and mind-made field that we create in our energy body and our physical body to protect our heart and our mind and our body from emotional pain. Because as kids, we're so vulnerable and we're so open and so sensitive and so vulnerable to everything around us. So everything that's going on for our parents, everything that's going on in the world. And, sometimes the world and school and our home can feel like a very threatening place or not very safe. And there's a lot of really intense energies and emotions and things going on around us. So by creating this separate self, this identity, which becomes our ego, who we think we are, not who we are, but who we think we are, we think we can control our environment and have some sense of control over ourselves and our life. And so we create this cocoon to protect ourselves from pain. And in my experience, I created my ego to protect myself from pain and to survive in the world. So to survive in my family, to survive at school, socially with my friends, and to kind of get by until I was at a point in my journey and in my life where I felt I had acquired the tools and the awareness to basically heal the emotional pain that was underneath my ego or my protective shell or my cocoon. And then as I heal that emotional pain, bring down the walls of the ego or break through the walls of the cocoon, and then live my life as a true, full and free expression of who Blake really is, not someone who's trying to fit in and in the social world or fit in with my family or their expectations or society's expectations. And so that's really, to me, one of the most important parallels between the butterfly's journey through the cocoon to become a butterfly and our own journey from childhood to be, creating our ego and our conditioned self are really not who we really are. We have to lose ourselves to find ourselves. We need to cocoon ourselves to liberate ourselves.
And I like how you say that, and it's, go ahead. Well, I really like how you say that, Blake. Excuse me, because I really want, this has really been dawning on me since reading your book, is that I think we're so hard on ourselves if we are in the cocoon phase, and we think, I'm not supposed to be here, and this isn't part of the journey, and that's that's counterintuitive to loving yourself unconditionally, right? Like not accepting where you are exactly in the present moment, wherever that is, and it's perfectly okay wherever it is. Like that was a huge flash of insight for me. So I wanted to thank you for illuminating that for me, and I'm really hoping that our listeners understand that, because that's huge. And then of course that leads into, so how I mean, obviously the point is to love oneself in any situation. How does unconditional self-love bring you out of that cocoon phase, or what is it that propels you or moves you out of the cocoon phase? What is the exact, is it unconditional self-love, or what specifically is it that moves one out of that?
Yes, well, I mean, I think everything comes back to unconditional self-love because, again, I believe that, one, we are love. That's who we are. And I actually believe the fundamental substance of the universe is love. So the energy that we talk about in science, the atomic energy that we talk about in physics, that is the fundamental energetic nature of reality, I actually believe that substance is actually love. And so this is kind of just a preface. I like to joke, everybody's got a theory about how the universe began. And that's a really good question.
Yes.
And there's a lot of different theories, but one theory I like to play with because it makes me smile is I like to say that Mr. God loved Mrs. God so much. They were so passionate about each other that they made love, and Mrs. God got pregnant, and she gave birth to the universe.
Oh, wow.
So I like to believe that we are the love children, or the universe is the love child of God and Mrs. God, or those energies, those masculine and feminine energies, the divine masculine and feminine God and goddess energies.
Wow. Love it.
So I believe in that way everything comes back to that love, and everything comes back to unconditional self-love, because my view is that the universe is one self. And it's a system that operates on love for itself. Like the sun is a part of the earth is a part of the sun. Without the sun's love for the earth, no life on the earth could live. And that to me is self-love from a universal standpoint. Without the gravitational pull that exists, the earth wouldn't exist. And so that's self-love on a bigger scale. So it all comes back to this idea of self-love. In fact, that was, and even what we're talking about right now with the ego, that was the core insight which actually inspired me to write You Were Not Born to Suffer. And that insight was that once I love myself unconditionally, loving another becomes an act of self-love. So
That's
as we
right.
bring down,
yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so as we love ourselves unconditionally, which heals the pain in our heart, which then brings down the wall of the ego or the separate self, we then love other people, and that's just an extension of us loving ourselves because there's no separation. So how this
got it. Go on.
Well, because a lot of times, when we don't love ourselves, we love other people, or we try and give our love to other people or please other people so they'll love us in return, which is unconscious and coming from insecurity and inadequacy. And it's still love, but there's a higher form of love when we love ourselves. It's a bit more pure. There's no manipulation or conditions that we place on the love we give or what we do out of love. And so going back to your question about, the cocoon phase, firstly, a lot of people talk about the ego as though it's an enemy or it's a bad thing, or some people talk about it as a pet that we have to train. And I personally feel that those perspectives can really misguide people, because in order to, in my experience, really be free, we have to embrace and love everything. And that means we have to embrace and love the ego and understand that it serves a purpose, that cocoon phase has served a very, very important purpose in our journey, and could actually be no other way. The only thing that could be different is the degree to which it develops and how early we get out of it, basically, because some of us stay stuck in our cocoon our whole lives.
Right.
I believe if we're willing to face the pain, we can be free. That's where we have choice. That's where we have influence over that process. So, yes, we live, because we are both physical and non-physical, right? Anytime we define anything or give a concept, label anything with a concept, we create a paradox. We create two sides of the coin, and thus the tension in between that. So on one level, yes, the creation of the cocoon, the creation of the ego is necessary, but so is our liberation from it necessary. And there's a tension, it's like where we are is exactly where we're meant to be. But the frustration, that we experience, which I think, was inherent in what you were expressing before, and I know times in my journey where I've been or get frustrated about where I am in comparison to where I know I could be or where I know I am going. I think deep in our heart, we all know that we're destined for greatness, that we are capable of so much, that what we could experience and create and achieve in this human incarnation, in this lifetime, is really limitless. And so even if we don't even talk about that, or we're not even conscious of that in our life, some of us are conscious of it and strive for that, and a lot of us are not conscious of it and don't consciously strive for that. But even so, in each case, I believe deep down we know that. We know we're destined and capable for so much. And so there's always that force inside of us that's driving us towards the realization of the highest vibration for our life, the most joy, the most health, the best relationships, the highest forms of love. And so the frustration that is birthed between being where we are, but knowing that we're going somewhere else is purposeful, because that is the energy, that is the fuel that drives us forward. So no matter where we are, and no matter where we think we should be or know we will one day be or want to be, the frustration is born out of that. Sometimes anger, sometimes sadness. All of that is the energy and the fuel that is going to propel us to heal the things we need to heal, address the situations we need to address, change the things that are in our power to change, express the things we need to express, and then go take the actions that we need to take. So that's kind of the dynamic of, we're in the cocoon, we're supposed to be where we are, but yet there's this knowing we're going somewhere else. We know we're going to be a butterfly, that we know that's our destiny. And, how do we get there? And why am I not there? And what do I do with all these emotions that are present? And so unconditional self-love means we accept that frustration. We don't pretend it's not there, because if we repress it, we make ourselves sick, and then we're not being authentic in our situation. But if we're frustrated with our job or our relationship, or really ourself and how we're dealing with our relationships or our job or whatever it is that we're involved in, if we accept it, we can work with it. If we deny it and repress it, then we just create more pain and we delay our liberation. But again, that's all purposeful, because that's what we need to learn in order to take the next step. I don't know, Edie, if you've gotten to this section in the chapter on the ego, but I talk about how I compare the ego to taking painkillers. So I don't personally take painkillers. But it actually came up as a really strong and tangible analogy, especially in today's world, because a lot of us are on pharmaceutical drugs, whether it be for headaches or for high blood pressure or antidepressants or anti-anxiety. We all struggle, and in today's world, there are lots of different pills that people use to help them through a certain period. So this just seemed like a really powerful analogy. So I talked about how as children, we create the ego, we create this cocoon for ourselves to protect us from pain. In the same way, if you have horrible headaches, then, at some point it may be okay for you to take some painkillers to relieve the headache. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's not in excess. And it's just a support system until you can find a long-lasting solution. But for a lot of us, what happens, and this is the same with the ego, is we stay on those painkillers for a long time, and we don't look at the root cause of where those headaches are coming from or where that physical pain is coming from. So not only do we not look at the root cause of the symptom or the physical pain, but we also begin to start building up toxicity from the painkillers in our body, from taking all the medication. It begins to create more physical pain on top of the physical pain that our soul is screaming out for us to heal. So in the same way with the ego, originally we created to protect ourselves from pain, but eventually we're supposed to get to the root cause, which is the psychological and emotional pain that is underneath the ego from our childhood that our soul is asking us to heal. But a lot of times we just keep creating more pain for ourselves by staying in an ego state of being, by protecting our heart from love and not being open and not being vulnerable. And then we keep creating additional pain on top of the original pain that our soul is asking us to heal. So again, it's that dichotomy, it's that contradiction that creates the pressure and the tension and the energy to move us forward. Because often the pressure has to get so intense. I know in my own life, and Edie, I'm sure, I'd love to hear from you. For me, it wasn't until the pressure got so intense in my body and my mind and my life that my ego cracked and opened to a new way of being.
Wow.
And
what a great metaphor.
Yeah,
what a great metaphor.
Thank you.
Well, I would love to, I think that's a great place to, I'm going to read this really short quote that's in your book, and then I think I'd love to talk more about, I think this might be a good time for your story, because this is, a great way to give people a personal example of breaking free. And, we've been talking about pain and, of course, suffering, right? Like this is the catch, is nobody wants to suffer, no one wants to be in pain, and yet it's part of the process. And of course, life is it's yin and yang. So as much as you are suffering, there is the flip side. It's we can always harness this energy that you're talking about to break free of that cocoon. And I'm really struck by this quote by Carl Jung, that you have just amazing quotes in addition to your own quotes in your book. But Carl Jung, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, he says people will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. And, of course, that's part of the more famous quote that I've always heard is, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And I've only heard the last part. So I really appreciate you finding the rest of that quote, and I think it's so true. As much as we want to be free, I think there's this huge fear of facing the unknown and facing our own pain and suffering, wouldn't you say? There's this, again, that dichotomy of wanting to be free and not maybe feeling like we have the courage or, but like you said, what I hear you saying is that it got so intense that your ego just cracked. And which is, again, an amazing, perfect metaphor for breaking free. You sort of reach that place where you can't help but change. You can't take it anymore. You can't take the suffering anymore, perhaps. But I would love to. What I'm going to do is take a really, really short break, Blake, and then come back. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to hear, and I'm sure our listeners would as well, your personal story and journey through transforming and coming into your own soul's liberation and realizing and actually becoming, I think, a master of unconditional self-love. So.
Well, thank you, Edie. I will. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm right here, and I will be here.
Okay. We'll be back in just a few minutes. You're listening to The Wellness Coach on Blog Talk Radio. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Wellness Coach on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Edie Summers, and I've been speaking with Blake D. Bauer, and he is the author of You Were Not Born to Suffer, Love Yourself Back to Inner Peace, Health, Happiness, and fulfillment. Blake Bauer is an internationally recognized spiritual teacher, energetic healer, and author. His pioneering work centers on loving yourself unconditionally in the present moment as the key to healing yourself, fulfilling your life's purpose, and realizing your greatest potential both personally and professionally. So, Blake, I was wondering, of course, you do talk about your story in your book, and again, I highly recommend that people get your book. It's literally one of my favorite books, and it's also a gorgeous cover, by the way. You've got this. Now, was this blue butterfly? Did you describe that to Robert Mueller, who designed your cover? Did you have him just design it as a blue butterfly, like the one that you saw? I'm curious.
No,
oh,
ironically,
no? Really?
I did not.
Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting. I respect his work very much, and so, which was challenging for me in the sense that I just handed it over to him and trusted that whatever he came up with would be perfect. And in the end, it absolutely was. And so, no, I did not tell him about the blue butterfly, and that just came to his subconscious naturally to me as a part of the higher order of things, of, what was actually meant to be and destined to be. So, yeah, no, it was very interesting how that all came about.
That is really interesting. Talk about synchronicity. Yeah, isn't it? I heard you say this earlier, that like sort of when we release control, maybe this is tying a couple of words of your wisdom together, but when we release control, that's sort of when things happen at their highest level. And there's like you also mentioned, there's the highest vibration that we can operate at, and I think that we wish so much to be happy, right, and to be free of suffering, that we try to control every situation, and yet it's when we release it that's when the magic happens. And kind of like this, I mean, your cover is alone, let alone your book, is divine, right? And you didn't tell him specifically what you wanted, and yet look what appeared that he came up with. It was like you guys were in sync. I mean, isn't that it's sort of, I really believe that part of being sort of in tune with the universe is like resonating with it. And I mean, that's like a different topic, but I think it's interesting how we can resonate sort of once we do release control. However, we still have to show up for ourselves, right, and love ourselves. We have to do our part, and at the same time release control, and just let it happen, and it's amazing what does happen. I find this like the hardest thing to do is to release control. I find it very difficult. But on that note, I would love to hear your story, because we've been talking about many topics: liberation, the ego, pain and suffering, vibration, unconditional self-love, and also I want to put into the mix desire, because we can talk about pain and suffering all day long, but you talk about how desire is part of liberating yourself, is sort of like kind of letting yourself feel your desires and follow them. And I'm curious about your story, because I know that I have a personal interest in this, just because of, for many reasons on a personal level, but the idea of addiction and just, I know that did you mention that you were, I'd love to hear your story, because the idea of desire and just sort of, I think that we think that maybe being liberated is like this, like free of desire, and it's really not. It's actually moving toward what we really wish for anyway, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I think there were a few things that you mentioned that are really obviously loaded and important points. And before we took the break, and I want to speak to them, because I think that they're just very important, for whoever's listening. I want, obviously the intention with our conversation is to be of service to the people listening as much as possible. And so I wanted to say that before the break, you'd mentioned the Carl Jung quote about what we do to avoid our own soul and to avoid our own pain. Even though we want to be free, we avoid ourselves so much. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted to point out is that, that desire for freedom and that fear of what that entails is synonymous, really, I think, on a deeper level for me, and I think for all of us, that we're all really just looking for love. That love is the one thing we want more than anything, in the same way, we want to be free or we want to be happy, but what we want more than anything is love. And that same love we desire above everything else is the same love that we fear more than anything. And I think that's really important to understand. And the reason why we fear the love that we're looking for, we want it, but we're so afraid of it. And the reason why we're so afraid of it is because that love, one, unlocks our heart, and two, brings to the surface all the pain that we have not felt or healed from the past. And so we want the love, but we're afraid of it because we're afraid of feeling the emotional pain that we've repressed from our childhood and from our past disappointments and heartbreaks and heartaches. And so often, if you look at your life right now, often we don't feel safe and we don't feel supported in our environment or in our relationships to break down and to totally let out all of the confused, scary, and painful things that are stored inside of our heart. And a lot of us have felt this way all our life. And so we want this love, but we're so afraid of it because it entails such a deep level of vulnerability, to be that open, that transparent. And so, and to actually receive the love that we're looking for, it's a very vulnerable thing, because if you let somebody in who, you show everything to and thus are really naked, then you might get hurt. There's that risk of getting hurt again, of being betrayed again, of being, someone not being kind to you or respecting you again, and or dishonoring you again, emotionally abusing you or psychologically abusing you or physically abusing you. We're afraid of being the victim again, really, to ourselves. But, that's why we want the freedom, but we're afraid of ourselves. So we do everything we can to avoid ourselves. So we want the love, but we do everything we can to avoid the love. And actually, the source of the love that we're looking for is in our own heart. But to get to that source, we have to go through all the pain, all those layers of pain that we've built up over the years. I just wanted to make that really clear.
Yeah, and I love how you say that it's in your heart too. It's almost like when you say that, it almost feels physical. Like, I know that I don't know too much about this yet, but I know that there are correlations right now, aren't there? Do you know more about that? Like, the heart is. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, it has more. They're finding new discoveries on it, like how it actually is. Like, it has neurons in it or something. Isn't that right? Or like you can actually feel in the brain.
Yes, and it's got a very, very powerful electromagnetic field, and I think often much more powerful than the brain's electromagnetic field. But I use the heart because, and really when I'm speaking, because I want to bypass the protective or defensive aspect of our thinking, and that idea of going straight to the heart.
I see. Right, I see.
And really the center of our being, the core of our being. And for a lot of people, that association is the heart.
And also, I know that you talk about this toward the end of your book about how you do have to come to a place. We don't have to do anything, right? But because our will is involved in this, but that living with an open heart is part of it. It's a big part of it, and being willing to be vulnerable, like you were saying, and risk rejection. Right, what I'm learning from you, Blake, is that what protects you from that is when you do love yourself. That's what I'm really learning here.
Yeah.
I'm learning many things, but it's like you can't be hurt by somebody if you truly, deeply, genuinely, authentically love yourself on the deepest level. It's like you're untouchable. Not untouchable, but you're. I don't want to use that word, but. You're not a victim in any situation because you're pure light,
right.
And
exactly.
That's your safety is unconditional self-love. That's what I'm learning, which is a huge a new way of thinking about it, because I know that people are afraid of being hurt and opening their heart. But that's really the only way to live. In my experience, if you do want to be happy or successful or healthy, is you do have to embody that vulnerability, and that's again where life opens up, just like opening up your heart does. And it's just I know that it can be profoundly scary, but so thank you so much for really clarifying that. And so what is your journey, Blake? Just for a personal example, you have a really great story. That was the first thing, of course, I read in your book is your story. And I'm a huge fan of stories, and I think it makes things really personal, and it's a great way to learn for other people. So if you don't mind sharing, what was your journey like to coming to where you are now?
Yes, thank you very much. Obviously, there's so much to say, but so I think, like all of us, we all have our challenges growing up, in our family environment, and they vary for all of us in different ways. And so I had my challenges as a child, but I believe we choose our parents and we choose the childhood that we have, and so I don't allow myself to perceive myself to be a victim to anything that happened in my childhood, thankfully. But what is most important for me to share is that, when I was about 14, I got heavily into drugs and alcohol as a way to, one, numb myself to my emotions and my inner world, and to numb my intuition and to numb my pain, and also as a means to survive socially, to fit in, to drink and to get high. And, and obviously this is all subconscious and coming from a survival mechanism inside of me. How do I survive and obviously thrive within the given nature of my environment or my circumstances? And so for me, I got, heavily into drugs and alcohol, and began just smoking pot and drinking, and then I started doing pills and, taking a lot of different kinds of pills like Valium and Vicodin and Xanax, and and then it got to a point where I even began to sell drugs, and did that to support my habit. And so between the ages of 14 and 18, that was basically a big part of my life. And I was also a very good athlete at that point in my life, and I played football in America, and was a captain of my team my senior year, and considering playing football at the next level, at college or university. And between the ages of 14 and 18, I had been arrested 3 or 4 times. I was suspended from my high school 3 or 4 times. And in the summer, when I was 17, before my senior year and my senior football season, which obviously would have been the biggest season for me, I got a DUI, driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs, and I actually fell asleep at the wheel. I, put my car in park one night in the middle of the night, actually coming home from a girlfriend's house, and put the car in park and literally fell asleep. And so I was arrested, and and obviously a danger to myself and a danger to other people. And I was arrested, and then eventually, it didn't happen until a few games into the senior season, I was kicked off the team, and lost that aspect of my life. I also pushed away, obviously, through all of that, my family, my parents. It caused them a lot of grief and pain, and and then also I had a girlfriend at the time. I pushed her away and hurt her deeply, and really hurt myself very deeply. So going back, kind of tying in the themes that we've been talking about, when I was 18, I had basically hit rock bottom. I had pushed away my girlfriend. I pushed away football, and all my best friends were on the team with me, and it was our life. So basically, the identity or the ego I had worked so hard to create unconsciously to survive basically crumbled. I lost total control of who I thought I was. I lost basically all the things that I defined myself by, and for other people, that might have happened at a younger age as a teenager like me, or for other people it happens later on in life. You lose a job, or you lose a loved one, or you were a mother and now you're not a mother anymore, so you've lost your identity, or you were a husband, or you were a breadwinner, or you were, whatever it is that you identified yourself with. Often when we lose that identity, we are lost, and we don't know who we are anymore. We don't know what we're doing with our life. And for me, thankfully, at the time it was very painful, but thankfully now, in retrospect, thankfully I lost myself and suffered very deeply at a very young age. And so, by 18, I found myself just very confused and very anxious and very insecure. I was, before that, I felt I was invincible, very, confident, probably arrogant. And that was all my ego protecting me from all this pain inside of me. And then I found myself, like I said, very insecure, very inadequate, very lost, very confused. Someone who, felt he fitted in completely now felt like he was on the complete outside of everything and everyone. And, that was a very tough time. But now I'm very grateful that happened, because that set in motion the realization of why I came to the planet, and this work that I now do every day that I love, and these great relationships that I love, and a very good relationship with my family. And so that began my quest, basically, to heal myself and to figure out why I came to the planet. So after high school, I had already made plans throughout this period to go on to college, because the high school I went to encouraged most kids to go to college. And so I had already put that in place. And the first school I went to, I had already signed up to study business and advertising. And for me, school was just kind of a sideline, and my personal life was the most important thing. And I just kind of, even throughout all of high school, that was just something you had to do. So it felt like that for me too, for college. I was just going with the flow. Everybody else, a lot of people I knew were doing it, so I did it. It was better, it just seemed like the right thing to do. And my family was encouraging it. So I just kind of went with the flow. But very quickly, I realized that what I was studying had no meaning to me. I had grown up, like many of us do, that money is the path to happiness and the path to success and the most important thing in life. And so all of those beliefs, which were attached to my identity, my previous identity, just all began to crumble. They had no foundation to stand on anymore. And I think because I had faced a lot of that pain alone in isolation, that the pain wasn't there to hold up these beliefs anymore. I didn't need to protect myself from them anymore, so it was easier for me to let them go. And so I dropped out of that first school I went to after a year and studied some philosophy. And then I just began reading everything I could on the nature of the universe and God and physics and biology and evolution and, all different forms of religion. And I began to practice meditation and yoga very consistently. I also was, like to work out and go to the gym a lot. But throughout that period, I also herniated discs in my back that stopped me from working out. Purposefully, because again, that gym life I had was a big part of my ego, and that forced me to do acupuncture, and that forced me to do yoga, and that all began to really wake me up, and I found great freedom from my suffering and great clarity in my mind through those practices. And I ended up going to 4 other universities. And I studied psychology, and I studied, nutritional medicine, and I studied early childhood development and educational theory, really, trying to understand myself and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I went and studied traditional Chinese medicine, so very, TCM, very balanced with science and the traditional medicine. And I did that for a year, and that, as interesting as it was, it didn't really nurture the deeper part of me that I was longing for, these answers that I was looking for. It was fascinating, but it still was not giving me the tangible, practical answers I was looking for to, experience life in a specific way that I knew was possible. So, when I was suffering at my worst, I knew that there was a way out of that suffering, and I was trying to find that. And I think anybody who's listening, and I'm sure, Edie, you can relate, that even in the worst of times, deep in your heart, there's a part of you that knows that life doesn't have to be this painful, and there is a way out. We may not know how, and we may not know where, but we know that it exists, and that keeps us going. That's that seed of hope, inside of us. And so I just kept going, and I studied a very spiritual form of Chinese medicine called 5-element Chinese medicine. And then I started doing hands-on healing work and studied Qigong healing and energy medicine, and began to do with my hands what I had learned to do with acupuncture, so not even needing needles anymore. And everything just kept progressing, and and then the list goes on. There are dozens of people that I was blessed to study with, spiritual masters, Qigong masters, Tai Chi masters, and again, the list just goes on. And eventually I got to this stage where, I knew that I was doing the work that I was born to do, which was working with people. I began to do counseling work, and I began to do coaching work, and I began to do energy healing and alternative medicine and lifestyle advice. I began to teach the meditation that I had been practicing for years. I began to teach the Qigong I had been practicing for years. But there was still something in my heart that was missing, that I felt, there was still this one reason I was born, and I hadn't fully grasped that yet. And, obviously that was many years later after my initial breakdown. But eventually, through some synchronistic events and some very life-changing events, I ended up coming to Australia, which is where I'm talking to you from now. And through some very life-changing experiences and events, I began to see, and as I mentioned earlier, while I was here, I actually heard the words that once I love myself unconditionally, loving another becomes an act of self-love. And at that time, I had been writing a lot about love and acceptance, and what is love and what is acceptance, and what is unconditional self-love, what is unconditional acceptance, and I had been writing, so I'd kind of been opening the channels for this to come through. And then at that same time, I was also contemplating this line from a movie that I love, and the movie is called The Fountain. And I don't know if you've seen The Fountain.
I don't know if I have.
It's a beautiful, beautiful movie by Darren Aronofsky, and Hugh Jackman's in it, and Rachel Weisz is in it. And it follows them. They're a couple, and they're soulmates in 3 different lifetimes.
Oh,
and
yes. Okay, yes.
It's a very beautiful movie, and it talks obviously about death and rebirth and the soul and love and the eternal nature of love, and it's a beautiful movie. And at this point, I had actually part of these life-changing events of coming to Australia was I met a soulmate, somebody I'd shared many lifetimes with. And, And so I'm in the middle of this experience, and I hear the words, and they were like, words, they were so strong inside of me. And, once I love myself, loving another is an act of self-love. Once I love myself unconditionally, loving another is an act of self-love. And at the same time, this line in this movie had stood out to me so clearly. And the line in the movie was that death is the road to awe, or death is the road to liberation, or death is the road to salvation. And a lot of cultures, especially a lot of traditional cultures, believe that death is the road to liberation of the soul. So once we die, then we can be free. But I've always had this in my heart that we could be free while we're in a human body, that we could be liberated within the body and really experience that freedom and that liberation that a lot of religions or philosophies you cannot experience until you're free of a physical body.
Interesting.
So basically, those two sentences became, that through loving ourselves unconditionally, we basically heal all the emotional pain that is under the ego or the separate self. And so that loving ourselves is basically the path to the death or the separate self, and thus the aspiration in this lifetime. And so that's when I began to see that self-love. Go ahead. Yes.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Can you say those last two sentences again, if you can remember? What was the part about death again? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I understand.
Yes, a lot of us believe we have to die physically to be reborn, but what we don't realize is that we can die to who we think we are every day, and actually multiple times daily, so that who we really are can be born more fully in our body and in our life.
Wow.
And so
that's profound.
Those insights, for me it was. And those insights basically just showed me that if you imagine a road up a mountain to and liberation within a physical body in this lifetime, this one right now that we're all living right now, that it was through loving myself unconditionally and through loving ourselves unconditionally that we walk the most direct path to that liberation. And so those insights basically later gave way to, I have to write a book about this, because I realized that in my own quest, a decade of looking for healing, learning all these different forms of medicine, looking for my purpose, looking for freedom and peace and enlightenment and joy, that all I was doing was, one, looking for love, and thus, two, learning how to love myself in order to find the source of love inside of me, and that was a path to liberation. And so that's what inspired me to write the book, because I knew in my heart that this was true for everybody, and it was not a religion. It was just to me, just resonated so true for me as a human being, and I could just see it in everybody around me. And so I felt I had to share the message that was actually why I came to the planet. And so far, the message is spreading on its own, and it has a life of its own, so it seems to be proving itself out, that it wasn't just, my own delusional thinking or some story I had told myself, but I think it is actually what the universe wanted me to come here and do.
Definitely.
So
I can feel that.
Yeah, so that's a little
go
bit.
ahead.
Yeah, so that's a little bit, I guess, about my story.
Yeah, and I love your story, and I thank you for sharing some details that aren't in the book too. So it's nice to get even more. I love details, and it's really a profound transformation, and I really meant it when I said it, that I think you really do embody. I mean, I've never met you in person, but just seeing pictures of you, like just the light in your eyes is just phenomenal. Like you just seem incredibly happy and fulfilled, and so clearly, your message is, not only have you embodied your message, but and living it, but I think that it does seem like that's what you were supposed to do here, and then and you're welcome, and also I'm an author myself, and it is no small feat to write a book, so congratulations on just
thank you.
This work of art, and you're welcome. And I have the book here. I don't know I didn't ask you this beforehand, but do you have it in front of you, Blake? I'm wondering if there's anything that you want to, if not, do you want me to read anything? I don't know if you have it in front of you, but I don't know, you do?
No, yeah, I do have it in front of me.
Do you feel like
to read anything?
You don't feel the need to read?
No.
Okay. Are you okay if I read something, or?
You can read whatever you want. I'm totally open.
Okay. I don't feel the need to read my own book. Well, first of all, it'll probably be random, except for, here's one, the death of self. You mentioned that. And I do want to get into desire, because I think that's something that really, here we go. That's funny that I mentioned that, because I flipped right to that page. How funny. Okay, well, before we go into that then, just really quickly, one of my favorite quotes from you is here. Let me see if I can find it, is, and you said this before in the beginning of our talk here, I was ultimately just looking for love when in fact I was love itself. I mean, you can't really get much better of a quote than that. You know, it's kind of like one of those, like, it's like a mantra almost to me. So... And of course, I'm going to read this chapter here. The paragraph. Like all of us unconsciously do, I also realized that I had lived my whole life like a puppy dog chasing its tail. I was ultimately just looking for love when in fact I was love itself. In awakening to this universal and fundamental truth, I realized that the path to finding the abundant source of love within us, which is also the path to embodying the love that we are, is one that requires all of us to answer the evolutionary call to master loving ourselves unconditionally. And this is just your introduction. It's just like insight after insight after insight in your book, and just for me, it was just a profound awakening because. Again, your writing does remind me of Eckhart Tolle, and of course, you are yourself, though. I mean, you're your own master, but there's this book is just chock full of insights like that, where it's literally like every line that you write. I'm curious, just from a writer's point of view, do you feel like the book just came through you, or did you like consciously, you know what I mean, like was every word consciously chosen, or was it more channeled, or was it like a combination? I'm just curious from that angle before I read the part about desire.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you very much. Like I got the chills when you read, you were reading. I think one, because it is universal, it's so healing even for me to hear. Because it's so much bigger than me and whoever Blake, is. It's so much bigger than my identity or my ego or even my being or my lifetime. It's so much bigger. Yeah. And obviously it was just an honor that what has been so meaningful to me is meaningful to you and to other people. So, thank you for that honor. I'm very grateful.
Well, it's okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Your question was, I'm sorry.
Well, just did you? I mean, because there are so many.
Oh, yes.
I mean, again, there's even like ocean of pure love and this ever-present source that's already alive within each one of us. Once we've suffered enough to finally value ourselves, that part really struck me. That's been a huge thing for me. Like, did you consciously choose your words, or did they flow through you, or was it a combination? I'm curious.
It was definitely a combination. So pretty much, I'd say 99% of the book was just, it came through me. It was inspiration. So it was like I just had to, obviously there's no separation. So it was my own awakening. And I was just writing what seemed to be the most important things that I had realized. And so it just came through my heart, and it was never forced. It took me, that book, the new edition, all up now, it's 5 years. It took me 4 years to get the first edition out. And when I say 4 years of writing, so, there were times when I was not writing, but, because things would just come through in their own time. I was clear the whole time from the moment I had those original insights. I knew that I was destined to write this book. So that was the beginning, and then I started to write, and it would just come through, and then it was probably more the editing. I edited the book over, probably 40 times, the whole text, literally reading every word and printing it out.
That's amazing.
And then, marking it up, and then going back, making the changes, reading it again, and printing it out. And I did that 40 times, and literally to the point that I made myself sick, because I swear to God, I got nauseous. Because it's like, if you think about a circle between what's inside of you and it's going out of you and then it's coming back in, and literally I had made myself sick. I got to the point where it was like, I just can't do this anymore, and then I knew it was ready, because I just couldn't do it anymore.
It was time to
suffer. It was time.
It was time to come out of the cocoon.
But I didn't. Exactly.
To fly.
It wasn't
time for your book to fly.
So it was time.
Exactly. Interesting.
So it was mostly just pure inspiration from my heart.
Wow.
And
wow. Excuse me. Yeah. You can really feel it, too. You can really feel it. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would say there were times when I would have a really strong idea that would be very inspired, and then what I would do would be I would sit, and then I would intellectually kind of dissect the idea so that when I went back to write, I was really clear. So definitely that active and passive, the writing and then the reflecting process that happened at certain points as well, so that I could communicate the ideas as clearly as possible. So I hope that answered your question.
And it does, thank you. It helps me, and I'm asking this, if anyone's listening is wondering, I'm asking this both for my own, because I'm finishing up my book, and it's really helpful to hear what the process is like for you, but also for other people listening, this is part of the process, right? Like, this is sort of what happens when you do love yourself unconditionally, is part of it is that professional commitment, responsibility that you talk about in your book to fulfilling your destiny, right? I mean, like this book is sort of like a fulfillment of you waking up, and which is pretty profound if you think about it.
I guess on one level, yes, and then on one level it just is, because I think there's no difference between me and you and your journey and my journey. So it just is. It's like I believe everything's spiritual. It's kind of the same idea. It's like the desk I'm sitting at right now is spiritual, and the money in my pocket is spiritual, and everything physical is spiritual, as well as our destiny and our purpose. And so a lot of us see a separation between what's spiritual and not spiritual, but the truth is that everything is, and everything that we're going through, and each of our unique journeys and passions and what we find to be our own purpose, it's all spiritual, it's all God, it's all love. So, and there's no separation. My what I came to realize in searching for my life purpose, why am I here, is that the book and what I do, the work I do with people is obviously a fruition of that, but it's all the result of me loving myself unconditionally. So I believe everybody's life purpose is to love themselves unconditionally so that they can become love, so that you can embody love in whatever you do. So, Edie, for you, that might, as you love yourself and you become love, that can manifest itself through your book, through your radio show, through whatever you choose to do. And for other people, that could be architecture. They love themselves and they love architecture, and they build beautiful buildings or homes, or somebody might be, like to make pottery or jewelry, or somebody might like to cook. So the path is unconditional self-love, and how that love manifests in the physical world is unique to each of us. And the only way we can find that is through following our heart and through following those desires in our heart, like like you want to get into.
Talk about,
So, so I think that's one thing I need, it's really important to know that I never heard, was that my purpose in life was to bring love into the world. And the way to do that was to learn to love myself unconditionally so that I could become love in whatever form that manifests. And I believe it's the same for everybody who's listening and everybody who's alive, so that we can love ourselves, love others, love life every day, love what we do, and always come from that place of joy and love instead of fear and, misery or,
That's so well said. And I'll say it again, Blake, that I really do think that you make this tangible. Like you're talking about everything being spiritual, and I think this is where it gets really real for me and exciting, because it's kind of like we're talking again about, you mentioned like a higher vibration, and it is kind of like I think I mentioned this in my book. At this point I don't remember, because there's, everything's running together, but I think I say stay in the vibration of love, or I read it somewhere, but that's kind of what's reminding me of, is like when you're talking about everything is spiritual, like, when you have those flashes, I don't know, maybe you have those all the time now. It's starting to speed up for me a little bit, where I do feel the sense of oneness with everything, and I do feel like I can, do you know what I mean? Like I feel like I can, I feel like this energy that you're talking about, where I'm like, oh, I get it, like this flash of insight. I'm like, okay, I get it. I feel one with everything, and it's like everything feels perfect and spiritual, but also very real. And there's no ego involved, and it's just such an incredible feeling and place to be. And what I get from you, I mean, among many other things, is that this is a tangible thing, kind of what you were talking about earlier. It's like that you can be born again, right? Like, but we can sort of like wake up and be liberated and free and embody love on this plane. I think we're always, to me, it seems like we're always fantasizing about something afterwards. You know, but the whole point is to be here now. And that's the other part is, I mean, your message, if I'm understanding it correctly, is unconditional self-love, but also in the present moment. And that's kind of like the other part of it is like being present. And I think that that can be really challenging for people. And again, it's, you know, there's so many ways that we want to run away from our own souls or ourselves. However you want to relate to it. But I think that when we're talking about desire here, I really wanted to I was really struck by this in your book when you were talking about desire, because I think, and you know, I know that you mentioned that you struggled with addiction when you were young, and that's, I think a lot of us associate addiction and desire, and yet what I read in your book is that desire is a good thing. It's when it's in balance, when we can find, this is a quote from your book, is when we can finally learn to enjoy life each day without doing so self-destructively, we can dance between what we desire, and the associated pleasure and pain always leads to a clear understanding of the universe's perfectly designed plan to, number one, wake us up, and number two, help us remember that all of the peace, health, happiness, fulfillment, freedom, and love we desire will only be found in the depths of our own heart and soul. It's so profound. But again, it's like that desire that we all have to wake up and feel love and freedom. We have the key, and it's, you know, but you make it seem so real. That's the part that I love is, anyway, I just wondered if you wanted to address anything with the concept of, maybe it's like, maybe if we're afraid to wake up, you know, that's one thing, but what about if you do desire, maybe you can get in touch with the feeling of the desire to wake up.
Yes, definitely. And that was definitely present for me. And I think that even if we're not conscious of it, that is a desire inside everybody. It's there underneath all the other desires, because we all want to be free. And like you said, we all want to be at home in the source of love inside of ourselves. And this is probably one of the most important points we can talk about. And I want to make this really clear for everybody, is that, so basically right now inside of us, we do have this infinite source of love and peace and happiness in us. It's actually who we really are. It's our soul's true nature. And it is covered up by pain from the past, emotional pain from the past. And then on top of that pain are the limiting beliefs we have that actually protect us from that pain. So the limiting beliefs are a layer that actually make up our cocoon. So if you imagine our cocoon, the fabric of our cocoon, the actual thread of our cocoon is the limiting beliefs. And those limiting beliefs protect us from pain. And underneath that pain is the source. And so what most of us do, and this is why it's important for us to go after our desires so that we can learn these lessons, is that right now in the present, what most of us do is we create these conditions in our mind where we say, I will be more lovable if or when I meet a condition in the future. So I will love myself when I lose weight, or I will love myself when I get my degree, or I will be more lovable, right, when I'm more successful. I'll be more when I do this in the future. And underneath that is that belief that I'm not lovable just the way I am. I don't deserve love just as I am. I'm not enough. I'm a bad person, or undesirable or not attractive. And those are the limiting beliefs that are protecting us from pain, from the pain we've had in the past. And firstly, all that pain that we store inside of us. So I believe, and my book talks about how all the pain that we experience and all disease, so all physical illness and disease, well, let me say 95% of all physical disease and illness and mental illness and all of our struggles in life, depression, are the result of us not knowing how to relate to ourselves with unconditional love, kindness, and respect in the past. Thus, all of our symptoms, all of our struggles, all of our suffering is a cry from our soul in the present, asking us to love ourselves unconditionally now. But instead, what most of us do on a daily basis, and not only a daily basis, but a moment-by-moment basis, is we say, I will love myself if and when I meet some condition in the future. And we're always chasing after that condition. And in the end, it's never enough. So once we get the degree or we lose weight, often we still don't feel lovable or we still don't feel good about ourselves.
Yes, and that's the rub, isn't it? That's the rub.
And the translation, that also that translates into, so if I say to myself, I'll be lovable when I lose 20 pounds or 50 pounds, or I'll be lovable when I make more money, or I'll be lovable when I get the degree, or I'll be lovable when someone loves me. When I say that to myself, I'm also saying I'll be happy when, I'll be at peace when, I'll be fulfilled when, in some future reality that will only happen if we meet some condition. But if we focus on that and we get there, we realize that actually is not going to give us the experience that we want. We're not going to be happy. We're not going to be at peace. And the reason why is because the only thing that blocks us from loving ourselves, from feeling love in our heart, from feeling at peace, from feeling happy, from feeling fulfilled right now in this moment is all the pain in our heart that's been caused by us not relating to ourselves with love in the past. So the key to ending that game and to being that self-destructive is to learn what it means to love ourselves here in the present right now.
Regardless.
And that's really, and when you talk about the marriage of being present and the marriage of loving yourself unconditionally, it's really important to see that the only thing that's stopping us are these beliefs and these thoughts in our head that we keep projecting into the future, that I'll be more lovable if, and I'll be more lovable when really the source of love is inside of you right now. And the only thing that's blocking you from that source is the pain from your past, from all the times that you haven't been true to yourself, you haven't expressed your emotions or what you're feeling, that you haven't stuck up for yourself or what you believe in, and that and all the moments that you've talked negatively to yourself or criticized yourself or been really hard on yourself. And most importantly, this is really important, all the times that you have let yourself be stopped by your own fear. So basically, we make ourselves the victim with our own fear when we let our fear control our choices in life as opposed to what we love. And that's why I say we have to go after what we desire, because that desire in our heart is the love in our heart that is driving us forward to learn all these lessons. So yes, you know, the idea is to go after everything, really, to go after, explore everything that you desire. So you can even accept, for example, you can accept a desire in your heart, let's say to eat a piece of chocolate cake without actually eating the chocolate cake. So there's not actually eat it. You could fully embrace it. But if you eat that chocolate cake and you enjoy it and it's a great experience, and then afterwards you don't beat yourself up, then that's okay. And so next time you'll be more at peace with that whole process. But if you eat the chocolate cake and you make yourself sick, or you break out in a rash, or you feel like crap, then you're going to learn from that pain on the other side of that pleasure. The next time you don't want the chocolate cake, and you'll be at peace with it, so the desire won't be as strong. But most of us, especially on the spiritual path, we repress our desires. And then we never learn the lessons about loving ourselves that those desires are driving us forward to do. So my experience is that the desires in my heart are God's desires, or the universe's desires, for me to learn the lessons about unconditional self-love so that I could bring love into the world. So even though I had a desire to write the book, for example, it wasn't the end. The end is for me to exist in a state of love and presence and kindness. And for me, I had to write the book. That was a desire in my heart for me to feel fulfilled, for me to feel that I'm fulfilling my purpose here. So basically, all of our desires are leading us towards fulfilling our life's purpose, which ultimately is to exist in the world as unconditional love. And how that looks is very different for all of us. So if you could imagine, we're all going to the same mountaintop, but we're all coming from a different direction. So,
yes, that's very well said.
So if our desires lead us into pain, then we learn from that. And it's like if you're really curious about touching the fire, and you desire to touch the fire to know what the fire feels like, then you know what? Go for it, because then you're going to learn that you'll burn yourself, and it's going to be very painful when you touch the fire. So next time you're in front of a fire, there won't be a desire. But if you don't act on it and you've never actually explored that fire, then you will probably live your whole life with regret that you never, ever went after what your heart desired. So even if, like for me, for example, like I said, I went to 5 different universities. I did probably 24 professional trainings. I never actually got a degree or graduated from anything. And a lot of people judged me and couldn't understand why I was going from one thing to the next, searching for what I was searching for. They thought I was just changing my mind or couldn't commit, when the truth was I was learning how to commit to myself on the deepest level that you could. And a lot of people couldn't understand that. But those desires led me in each experience, each thing that I desired, and then later realized that wasn't the thing that was going to fulfill me, led me to the realization that everything I desired was already inside of me. And it doesn't matter how much I tell you or how much anybody tells us that. Someone 10 years ago or 15 years ago could have told me this and outlined it. But if I don't go through it myself and experience it myself, then I'm not going to actually understand it fully. I won't get it. So that's why we have to go after what we desire, so we actually get it.
And
it's not
thank
just
you
an
for
idea.
saying that.
Yes.
It's not just it's not just an idea, so it's real. And also it is, I think a lot of people can relate to feeling judged, for everybody has their path. And I really do think that people deep down inside know what they desire, what they want. It's just, everybody has their own path, and they are, even if you may not know exactly what your path is, but you have a feeling about it. And, and I think it's really important for all of us to respect each other's paths. And also for ourselves to respect our own paths, because they're very unique. And, there's no way that, each life is such a mystery, and the universe itself is so mysterious, and it's endless, and it's so to honor your own path is and to feel and just to find the courage to follow it is huge for any of us. And so whether or not other people can understand us, it really does come back to respecting and loving yourself enough to know that all the way, respecting and loving yourself all the way, and trusting and knowing that you are on your path, whether or not where you're going to end up, that just loving yourself along the way and respecting yourself regardless of who's thinking what on the outside, because it's ultimately it doesn't matter. And it can get in the way too, and I think that's a lot of us are afraid of that. So I think that's definitely, I really appreciate you mentioning that. And then also I think for me, the other part is, and this is what really came up for me, Blake, when I first started reading your book, because I was it's definitely been, I'm realizing now, a theme for me. And I'm just going to, I'm going to be a little vulnerable here. I know we're getting toward, we technically, and you and I have been talking about this, we technically have a little less than half an hour, and I'm going to leave it up to you where it feels good for you, because I definitely want to, leave off where it feels natural. This is such a really, I think, important conversation. And so I'll just let you, just let me know when it feels good for you. But I want to say that one thing that really came up for me in this, and I was kind of afraid in the beginning because I know that it's an issue for me, and it's really hard for me to even say this out loud, but I'm going to say it because I figure there's no time like the present. But I was really struggling with,
good for you.
okay, well, thanks. But so I've always struggled, well, I'm realizing now I've always struggled with self-worth. And so and you can tell yourself, oh, it's not really there, or somehow it will resolve itself magically, or but it always, your thing kind of follows you around wherever you go until you do face it directly. And that is I think that is one of my biggest sources of pain. And so for me, what I found actually in reading your book is that it feels good to love myself. Like it's like facing my feelings of, low self-worth or not feeling like I have self-worth really wasn't as scary as I thought it was. It was actually really liberating. It felt really good. Like the more I practice unconditional self-love in the present moment, it's all I feel is I feel more relaxed, I feel safe, I feel more free, and I don't, sort of like it sort of dissolves that feeling of self-worth the more that I do it. And it can be challenging in the real world, right, to honor yourself in every situation and to say what you need and to express your feelings. And yeah, that part can be scary, especially in my situation, if I don't feel that feeling of self-worth, to say what I need and what I feel can be really challenging. But if I have that safety net, it feels like a safety net to me of unconditional self-love, then it really does work, is all I can say. And I've noticed I've made some really like kind of profound transformation, in the last little while here. So it's definitely, this is practical advice, I shouldn't say advice, it's wisdom, and it really does work. And it's not as scary to face yourself as you might think. It's scarier to not face yourself, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, to me, I think that's to not feel your pain is scarier than to feel it. That's been my whole experience in this. Is that's the real source of suffering right there. So.
Yes.
Any thoughts? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And I guess I'm just so happy to hear that you feel, what you've read and what you've realized for yourself through that process has been helping you to deal with that, because, I always struggled with low self-worth and insecurity and inadequacy myself. And most people do deep down, most people do struggle with that issue. And what I've realized and again, I like to make things as simple as possible and as practical as possible, and for myself and for other people. And so what I've realized with that whole dynamic is that the most important thing to understand really is that in every moment of every day, we have a choice to either be true to ourselves or to not be true to ourselves. So we either love ourselves or we let our fear stop us from loving ourselves. And when we are too afraid to say what we really think or feel, or what we really want and need, or to even try, even if we're not clear, to even try being true to ourselves, what we do is we abandon ourselves. We abandon our soul. We betray who we really are. We betray ourselves, and we hurt ourselves very deeply. So this is so important to understand, and it is probably the most life-changing thing to understand, is that when we are not true to ourselves in any moment, situation, or relationship, we hurt ourselves so deeply. And it is in that experience that we create all of the negative emotions that cause us pain. So when we betray ourselves, we hurt ourselves. We create anger towards ourselves for not being true to ourselves. We're frustrated and angry at ourselves for not being courageous enough or loving ourselves enough to overcome that fear. We create guilt and shame, because if you think about it, you're telling a lie. When you're not being true to yourself, you're not being authentic, you're not being real, and you're lying to yourself and to other people. And so you create shame. You're ashamed of yourself. You create guilt. You're guilty. You feel guilty for not being true to yourself. And you create regret for that moment of not being true to yourself in that moment. And we also make ourselves the victim. So in that moment of not being true to ourselves, we birth all of, in Buddhism, they talk about co-arising. Things co-arise. So when we're not true to ourselves, all of the uncomfortable pain and suffering arise in that moment. So everything we don't want in life flowers when we're not true to ourselves, basically. And if you think about it, most people have been betraying themselves since they were kids and have never learned to overcome their fears and be true to themselves in every relationship with their family, their spouse or their partner, their friends, their children, their parents, their boss. And if you think about it, that's why so many of us struggle and are not happy, because every day we're lying to ourselves in some way. So that's the key. So how do we remedy this? Okay, so how do we fix 20, 30, 50 years of hurting ourselves and betraying ourselves? So first, we have to become more present. We have to feel our body. We have to become aware of what we're feeling. And that's a process in and of itself, to know that you're feeling angry, to know that you're feeling hurt, to be able to express, I feel hurt, I feel angry, I feel sad, I feel neglected, to be able to understand what you're feeling, and to be able to understand, well, what do you need in this life? Do you need, do you need more time for yourself? Do you need more support from the people in your life? Do you need more attention, or do you need someone to listen or to understand the things that you need, and then also to understand what you want? So what do you really want? Well, I want to be happy, or I want to write a book, or I want to travel the world. So to get to become really familiar, so you come home to the present moment, to come to your body, come to your mind, to ask yourself questions like, what am I feeling right now? What do I need? And what do I want? What do I feel? What do I need? And what do I want? Then once you get clearer, and over time we get more and more clear with that, then the next step is to talk about it, and talk about it with the people in our life. So with our partner, our family members, our friends, and about, whether it's about work or, all the different important parts of our life, we need to start to really talk about what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we want, and what we need, and to honor that. So then to speak and act based on what's true for us. And that starts to heal the pain we created from the past from not being true to ourselves. So it heals the past by loving ourselves in the present in this way. But it also prevents, it's like preventative medicine. It prevents us from creating more pain, more depression, more disease, more illness in the future. So that's the remedy, is to love ourselves right now and express what we're thinking, feeling, what we understand that we want and need, even if we're not clear, to start getting it out. And by doing that, we heal the past in the present, and we prevent future suffering in the present, if that makes sense. So
I love how you say that. Yeah.
Go ahead. So again, we're not going to feel worthy of good things if we don't treat ourselves of being worthy. So if you're not true to yourself, of course you're going to feel guilty and ashamed and not good enough. And how can you feel sorry for yourself and respect yourself at the same time? So the only way to respect yourself is to be true to yourself. The only way, and self-respect comes with self-worth. So that's one thing. But the other really important thing to understand, again, to make this practical, Edie, and I'd love you just to kind of check in and see how this hits you for your own experience. Okay. When you don't express what you're really thinking, feeling, want, or need, so when you're not being true to yourself in any moment or situation or relationship, and you internalize and repress those thoughts and those feelings, what we do is we cut ourselves off from the source. So remember I talked about there's that source inside of us of peace and health and happiness and love. And that source is one with the universe. That's our infinite self that is literally and tangibly one with all of the energy in the universe as it expands infinitely out in every direction as far as we're capable of knowing or seeing at this point in human evolution. We are one with that. And that source inside of us is one with that larger universe. So when we repress what we're thinking, feeling, wanting, or needing, we cover up that source. It's like taking a hose and twisting it, putting a kink in it, and you're stopping the flow of life. So when you repress what you're really feeling, you're repressing that energy from flowing naturally. So you begin to feel cut off, and that's why I believe we feel inadequate, because we're disconnected from we've covered up or blocked the source of infinity, of abundance. So the key to
and like
remedy
infinite
that,
love.
again.
Oh, go ahead.
Exactly. And so the remedy, again, it's so simple. Accept what you're feeling and thinking and express it. And even if it causes a lot of uproar in your life, because in the past you have not expressed yourself, because, and everybody's used to that, you're just going along with it or pleasing. So, yeah, it might shake up your whole reality, but in the end, it's the healthiest thing for you and for everybody involved, even for the people who get upset. Again, all you got to do is just check in, come to be aware of what you're thinking, feeling, what you want, what you need, and begin to express it. And then when you do that, in every situation where you feel you need to say something or you need to be true to yourself, then you keep that source open. You keep that channel open. You keep that hose open and flowing, even if it's scary. And then you always feel adequate because you're respecting yourself in every moment. You're respecting your thoughts. You're respecting your emotions. You're respecting your needs, and you're respecting your desires. And when you respect yourself in that way, you feel worthy and deserving of the best in life. And that's simple. It's challenging, but it's not complicated. We make it complicated in avoiding the simple answer, because the simple answer is challenging.
And also we make the fear worse than it has to be. But also what I hear you saying is that when you don't kind of disavow your own feelings, you reconnect with source, and so you've got support. Like it's when you don't honor yourself that you're kind of, I mean, you're still connected, but it's I love the metaphor of the hose, because who doesn't want like a direct line to source? Like it's just, you want to keep that channel open. And then so you've got the support that you need.
And eventually that source will open back up. And so the pressure will get so bad that you'll be forced to open up. So then your choice becomes, right? So how does that manifest? That can manifest as mental illness. That can manifest as, outbursts of anger and reaction. That can manifest as death. I mean, physical death. You can actually make yourself so sick. Well, I believe all cancer and all physical disease, or say 95 to 99%, comes from this dynamic, just not expressing your emotions and not being true to yourself. So over time, your energy channels, the channels inside of you, become so blocked up, and the pressure builds that your system stops functioning. You get masses, you get tumors, you get ruptures, you get toxins, because so much is not flowing that if you were just true to yourself, would be flowing. And so again, it can become bipolar, it could become manic depressive, it can become physical illness, it can become very reactive, or it can lead to, or eventually actually it does, not could, but eventually it leads to physical death earlier than necessary if we're true to ourselves.
And so that's really is that, and I did. It's really interesting too, because I really did get the feeling in your book that you were talking about, like, so being authentic is a huge part of being true to yourself. Being authentic is a huge part of loving yourself unconditionally. And I was kind of joking to myself that I have in this huge book that I'm finishing, like there's a sentence where I say, in my next book I'm talking about authentic health, and then I thought to myself, I don't need to write that book because Blake's already written it. It's called You Were Not Born to Suffer. Like, you've already addressed it. Like, authentic health is what you've written about. So anyway, that was just something that popped into my head. So it's already been done. So thank you. And so Blake, if someone wanted to work with you, because I know you've worked with thousands of people, which is amazing all on its own. How would they contact you? How does someone go about working with you? Maybe you can give us a little bit of like detail into what happens. And because I mean, obviously, like you also do like when you work with someone, do you do like energy healing and like do you work with them, like teach them qigong and stuff like that too. So it's kind of like a whole thing.
Yes, it depends, obviously on a few factors, which is, what people are struggling with right now, what they want to achieve, and, the gravity of their situation. So it's a combination of counseling or therapy and also life coaching towards creating what you want in your life. It's also alternative medicine, so we address, diet, lifestyle, supplements, and I also do, very deep energy healing with people. So it's quite, a mixture of things, and everybody's different. So I just kind of call on what's most appropriate at that time. And I definitely do teach people qigong and meditation because I believe they're two of the most powerful healing practices that we can do for ourselves, to heal ourselves, basically. In my book in the beginning, I talk about, the old story, that you can give a man a fish and he eats for a day, or you can teach a woman to fish and she will eat for a lifetime. And to me, learning to love ourselves unconditionally, that's how we fish. And, even like the metaphor of Jesus, we fish for our own soul and keep fishing for our own soul. And so for me, that's why I wrote the book, was because I felt that I could help people to love themselves unconditionally, or fish for themselves, and thus nourish their soul forever.
Yes.
Which
is the point.
So that's what I do so one-on-one, that's what I do with people, and I also do that with couples, and even families.
Oh, wow.
So it manifests in different scenarios. It is wonderful, and I, obviously I thank God, love what I do, and it's an honor, to be witness to people's most vulnerable parts of themselves. So it's a great honor. So I have a website. Like you were saying, just in case people want to contact me, my website is unconditional-selflove.com. My book is on Amazon. I'm on Facebook. I work with people all over the world via Skype. Right now I'm in Geelong, Victoria, which is an hour outside of Melbourne, Australia. There are people who come from all over Australia to work with me. So I'm very open and flexible. I will block out a whole day for people who are coming from out of town, sometimes even 2 days, to do intense work. So there's many options, and then I teach workshops and seminars a few times a year, which you can find either through Facebook or on my website. So
and your Facebook page, I wanted to mention, you have a couple of Facebook pages, right? I mean, you have You Were Not Born to Suffer by Blake D. Bauer. Go ahead.
For the book.
Yeah.
Yes, so there was You Were Not Born to Suffer for the book, and then under my name, Blake Bauer, which is Blake, and then Bauer, Bauer, there's another page. So either of them are great. Blake Bauer is probably ideal as far as events and news and things like that. I also have an email list on my website that anybody could sign up for, that I only send out things occasionally if there's an event or something to announce.
Okay. And I have a question. Thank you so much for sharing that. And also, I want to mention again, if anybody wants, so again, you graciously offered, you sent me 2 extra copies of your book, which is just so amazing. And I anyone who has this book it's just a huge gift. And again, so we're giving away 2 of Blake's books, a copy of his second edition. It's got the beautiful blue butterfly on the front. And if you want to win a copy of Blake's book, go ahead and go to connectwell.com. Again, it's spelled unusually with a K in the middle, so it's CONNECTWELL.com, connectwell.com, and fill out a free profile. And then I made this an essay contest just because I guess I'm a writer, so I didn't think I just didn't want it to be random. So just write a couple of sentences even of why you think you should have this book, and we're going to pick 2 people and send you copies, which is kind of cool. So, and then I had a quick question, Blake. So energy healing, this has been coming up a lot lately. We have got about 6 minutes left here, but when you do energy healing with people, are you doing is it like Qigong or is it something else? I'm just curious what that would be.
Well, Qigong is definitely a form of energy healing, and I actually think it's the most powerful form of energy healing because if we learn Qigong, like I was using the fishing analogy, we learn how to heal ourselves. We learn how to keep our energy channels open, and Qigong helps us to purify the mind, the body, the heart, and the energy body. And so for me, it was one of the most effective practices I've come across. But what it helped me to do was twofold. So as I practiced more and more Qigong and loved my body and took care of my health and expressed my emotions, I began to clear out all the toxicity in my body, in my heart, and my mind, which did two things. It allowed more energy to come through me from the universe, so from the earth and from the universe around me, so to bring through a higher vibration and more powerful, more quantity, higher quality of energy when I'm doing energy healing. And Qigong is also a technique that helps you to build your own life force and actually store energy in your body that's a very high quality, high vibration. So it definitely helped me to become a more effective practitioner, more sensitive. It helps you to become much more sensitive to energy, to actually feeling energy on a very deep level. So it manifests in various forms, and it's definitely helped me personally and also professionally.
Yeah, it's actually Qigong. I like how you say it better, but it's actually called energy cultivation, and it's, I think, super, super useful for anyone who has low energy, for instance, or if you have some kind of chronic condition. Qigong is phenomenal. I love how you were describing it, because I didn't think of it that way, but it does help you store more energy, but also release, and kind of it raises your vibration, like you were saying, but at the same time also store up more energy that you need. So thank you for saying it the way that you did, because I had no idea how powerful it is, and so yeah, we have so many tools, and I also just really wanted to point out to people that, when they are becoming their authentic selves and learning to love themselves unconditionally, and they are asking themselves, what do I need? What do I feel? How do I express this? It can be extremely helpful to work with a professional like you, because you want to work with somebody who's safe and who's been there. And I think that, and not every single person in your life is going to be safe. So sometimes, you can talk to people, obviously. I think in a lot of cases it can work, but there are definitely professionals, very specific professionals like you that are here for this reason, is to help you, to guide you on that path. So whatever path anyone decides to take, just I want them to know that they're not alone, that there's definitely support out there. So there's no reason to be afraid.
No, definitely not. There really are. That's a great point, Edie. Is there are some great people out there who have good intentions and have actually done the work themselves. But so that's one side of the coin. And then the other side of the coin is that nobody can do for us what we can do for ourselves. And nobody can save us. Nobody can rescue us. Nobody can heal us. And we are the only people who can do that. And the way to do that, to love ourselves unconditionally and to master that. So we can have people who we trust that reflect back to us where we're not loving ourselves and how we're not loving ourselves. But in the end, we're the ones who have to do it. We're the ones who have to break free of our own cocoon. Because, like the story, if anybody tries and helps us, we're going to die. Our soul will die.
Oh my gosh, Blake! That's the perfect place to end. Thank you so much for saying that. And it's because that is, I think I've noticed this. Maybe you've noticed this too. That when people do contact me, I realize that they might be thinking that she's going to do this for me, and ultimately that's the truth. Is that everyone, you do it yourself, but you can't.
Right.
We have 90 seconds. You probably heard that, but that I think it's the perfect place to end, because like you said, you can set yourself free. You have to set yourself free, but other people can mirror back to you what freedom looks like and what it feels like. So that is the reason to seek help. But thank you so much for clarifying that, and for coming full circle. Just what a beautiful way to end this time with you. And so I just wanted to spend this last minute. I just want to thank you so much, Blake, for sharing your gifts and for writing this just phenomenal book. You Were Not Born to Suffer, and also just for being you. It's just been really great to know you, and just thank you so much for all that you, for being your authentic self in this world, for being a shining example of and walking the walk, talking the talk. So thank you so much, and
thank you, Edie.
You're welcome, and thanks for coming on my show, and best wishes with everything.
Oh, thank you so much. I do appreciate it so much, and I hope whoever's listening found it helpful. And the one thing I did want to say, for anybody who wants a book that doesn't get a book from the competition, on Amazon, the Kindle book is only $2. And you can read that on your computer, you can read that on your phone, you can read that on your tablet. So that's a great option, for $2. I guarantee you will not find anything that will change your life as much for $2 as this book. So,
well, thank you for mentioning that. I really appreciate it. And so on that note, I just want to thank you again, and I'm sure that we'll talk again at some point. And again, thanks to everyone for listening. And just take care and have a great day.
Thank you, Edie. It was an honor. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks. It was mine, too. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.